Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Arden, and today we're talking about Justice League number 49. I've reviewed quite a few Justice League comic books at this point from the most recent run, featuring Cy Spurrier in the last two issues, Venditti before that, and this is part two of a story that we covered from previous issue, number 48, where the Justice League basically got put in charge of an alien planet, and they had to deal with basically these competing, or well, basically the crux of this issue is Wonder Woman objecting to them controlling this world that was basically composed of two warring races, we'll say, that were at this like detente under a single empress who ruled them with an iron fist. And half of these aliens believed in technology, the other half believed in organics as a means to advance themselves. And without the ruler, they were basically ready to go to war with one another. And the only thing they could agree on was the Justice League ruling them. And this issue is all kind of about Superman, Batman, the Flash, and Green Lantern trying to rule this society, or at least put them on the right path, while Wonder Woman basically objects to the whole principle and saying, well, we're superheroes, but we're really not qualified to be dictators. And that debate, although it feels a little forced at first, and I feel like everyone except for Wonder Woman kind of comes across as a little dense in this story, like, or naive might be the better word, because they make a lot of mistakes here that feel borderline insane. Like the Flash stops these two aliens from eating one another, but it turns out that's just part of their mating ritual, and they'll regrow their limbs once one of them eats it, but that's how they reproduce. And he's like, well, I didn't know that. That's an unfair thing for me to have known. Like, but we're learning, and we're gonna do these people right, kind of thing. And Wonder Woman kind of points out all these other flaws that they've had in ruling over this society. The heroes try and pull back a little bit, and then the two factions just start warring with each other. And she's using this parallel about this giantess from Greek mythology that had similar issues ruling over people. And at the end of the story, she talks about how basically these people overthrew their giantess master because of her mistreatment. And, well, spoilers, but that's pretty much where we go from here. In spite of some character flaws where the Justice League does come across as a little naive, I do kind of understand where they're coming from. I can see characters like Batman and the Flash not being really used to this sort of thing in alien cultures and worlds and making those kind of mistakes. It feels a lot less understandable when it comes to Jon Stewart, who should know better by now, and even Superman, who should have enough experience dealing with alien races and cultures that he should be more understanding to Wonder Woman's objections and kind of nuanced in how he's leading this planet. That being said, I kind of understand where they're coming from, and I think for the sake of this story, once we kind of get past that bit of forced character work, good afternoon, Raphael. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Once we get kind of past that barrier, it is a fun issue. There's a lot of great artwork and cool bits of action where the Justice League squares off against these alien invaders who are taking advantage of the fact that this planet is now all decimated, basically, from the Justice League overthrowing the previous regime. Pratik, thanks for joining us. You guys were both hanging out yesterday, so that's cool. We got a whole bunch of other comics to talk about today. And Aaron Lepresky does a really good job with pencils. Matt Ryan is an excellent inker, and David Barron does a good job in making this issue feel colorful and fun. I talked a bit the other day about how I find these Justice League books are a nice kind of step back from some of the more epic events going on at both Marvel and DC right now, and it's nice to have a relatively grounded series about a mainstream superhero team out there, because that's kind of how I feel about this Justice League story. It's not the most epic thing in the world, but they are talking about leading a planet, so it's not without stakes. But compared to something like Death Metal and even Empire, this feels nice and straightforward and grounded in a certain sense that makes it a fun issue for me to follow. I like the conflict going on in this story. It feels very interesting, even if, like I said, there's a little bit of a glitch in the character work going on here. It's almost worth us forsaking some established character stuff just so that we can get cool moments like with Wonder Woman on that side of the debate. Braddock saying he loved Wonder Woman in this chapter, and it felt like she was truly in character. Yeah, she's on point. It's everyone else that I feel they had to bend a little bit just to sort of service this story. And I think it was okay to do that. Like, when we look at these heroes, they are trying to do the, like, a side of Wonder Woman. Everyone's trying to do the right thing, and Batman's not being stupid. He's just having trouble understanding it. So at one point he tries to broadcast to both the races at once, and it hurts them physically and, like, emotionally, because they're not used to joining with each other, and they feel corrupted in the process of Batman just talking to these people. And then they talk about, like, how they disarmed the entire race so that they won't war each other. And then they start having to try and form a militia to fight off the alien invaders. So the people that they're in charge of are rightfully like, well, are we using guns or not? And under what context are we using? And they have trouble understanding, like, the need to form a military without fighting each other. And that's a pretty interesting point. And all of this stuff is kind of done with a degree of subtlety. It could be very on the nose and very like, well, we're talking about racism, and we are talking about racism to a degree, but this is just a really interesting treatise on colonialism. Raphael and Braddock are both talking about how, like, great Wonder Woman is in this story, and Raphael even mentioned how much love she's getting lately, and that's very true. Outside of her, like, main series, she's getting a lot of, which is, you know, always giving her attention, but she's getting a lot of attention in the peripheries and stuff, where she's like a major figure in this Justice League story. She's the main character of Death Metal, and it's friggin' awesome. She is a huge part of Justice League Dark, and right, well, she was. I'm not totally caught up on that series right now, so I don't know if that's still a thing, but it's good that they're making use of Wonder Woman, and they're doing so very effectively lately, with cool stories featuring her that do a good job. Wonder Woman's whole driving character arc in Death Metal is really interesting, and in this one it's well done. She's the entire focal point of the narrative in this, telling the story of the giantess and kind of framing it a little bit in terms of like how she views the events relative to the past, and it kind of fits perfectly. Obviously they made up the story to fit in with the present day story. That was a little bit of gibberish, but what I'm getting at is that they blended the two stories together really well. The lessons Wonder Woman is imparting onto the present day very nicely match, even though it was obviously designed to do so from the beginning. It's just a well-executed script, I guess is what I'm dancing around. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend the Justice League series right now. It's been a lot of fun. And on the whole, like I said, it's just a nice break if you are feeling overwhelmed by some of the more epic stuff going on. A person mentioned, and it's something that I didn't talk about in my Death Metal review yesterday, but I will bring up now because it is kind of relevant. And it was something I was thinking about after having read issue 2 yesterday of Death Metal. These Death Metal comics are awesome, but not at all accessible. Even if someone had read Metal before Death Metal, there's a ton of little details and stuff you really got to know your DC to fully appreciate, ranging from the Black Lantern Corps to the finer details about some of these characters and where they came from, to even all the stuff with Perpetua and the Justice League series kind of building into this thing. They very much said Death Metal would be a jumping on point. I don't think that's the case. As much as I like Death Metal, I can't imagine introducing this to some of my friends without knowing that they would have at least some context. Like, they would have had to have read a lot more comics than just what's in these 2 issues, I feel, to really appreciate what's going on there. These Justice League books, on the other hand, sure, I could give someone issue 48 and 49. They don't have to have read anything else. They can figure out who these characters are on the cover. They, like 49 on its own would be a little confusing, but 48 and 49 as a story arc is perfectly easy to jump onto. And the story before this one with the Spectre felt like that too. So in that regard, I think they're they're doing a pretty good job of making these Justice League comics light and easy to hook on to. Paddock was saying, one important thing this chapter was every hero was doing what they think they would. Yeah, that's an interesting. I personally feel like John Stewart would be a little more nuanced in how he dealt with some of these things. And so would Superman, but they weren't being evil or like imperialist. They were doing their best, and if anything, I think that shows nicely like a little bit about colonialism and like world history and how even well-intentioned actions can be deeply damaging to a society that doesn't that its rulers doesn't understand the finer nuances of their own culture. And that's especially true for an alien race that like partially eats one another to mate. That half of them are technologically based and half are biologically based, and all their children kind of make that decision as part of adolescence, and it's a key part of their like cultural history, but also the rituals they go through growing up, and they get into all of that in this book. For a short little comic, there's a lot to these 2 issues so far, and it's a pretty cool little alien race and whole little story they've concocted. I didn't think there would be so much to this. I certainly like issue 49 more than 48, because as they're getting into these things, there's a lot more depth than I expected. At first, I kind of thought this was just more of a classic, original kind of Justice League story where we're just sort of getting a simple backdrop of like this alien race to just tell a bit of fun story and let the League let loose against some aliens. And while that's kind of what they do, there's way more politics and like interesting points going on here for a Justice League comic. Like, I don't even really need to qualify it as like, oh, for a superhero comic. It's pretty smart. It's pretty smart all on its own. You could kind of sub out all these major superheroes here, replace them with other characters that were just more powerful than the alien race for whatever reason, like convert this whole thing into a more generic sci-fi story, and the core of the story would stay the same, and what I like about it would still be intact, which is pretty cool. And I wouldn't say you need to do that for any reason, but I think it just shows that like, oh, it doesn't need the superhero stuff to just be a good story, and I think that's a good earmark of quality that you can't really say for every superhero comic and that sort of thing out there. So yeah, fun little issue overall, and I think that was good. Raphael was saying I would stay a virgin in that alien society. Yeah, I mean our arms don't grow back, so it really doesn't work. In their case, it's fine otherwise. They say it's an act of love, and it's like, well, sure, I don't think it's even that painful of an experience for them. It just chomps off the arm, gets pregnant from that somehow, and then the new arm grows back. You know what I like about that? Like, that's nutty and weird and stuff, but that's alien. That feels like a really alien and weird thing that we would recognize as a harmful act. And even in the context of the story, it's like, oh, well, society just collapsed around them. So yeah, maybe some of them are resorting to cannibalism and that sort of thing. But if they but that's not what the Flash was stumbling on in that situation. It was just a normal act of their day-to-day life, we'll say. Obviously, it's a special moment in these aliens' life or whatever, but it's like, it's normal to them. But to the Flash, it was like the actions of desperation as the society they're trying to keep intact. So his behavior does make sense. He does some other stuff in this issue, though, where it's like, yeah, like, Barry's supposed to be a smart guy, and you can see why he's well-meaning, but it's like, oh, he's not. None of them are used to any of this stuff, and Wonder Woman even says that. It's like, well, we're good at smashing things, but this leadership stuff is not our wheelhouse and not really in our instincts. Even Wonder Woman, who has some experience with ruling things and stuff, really isn't comfortable with this role at all, and outright rejects it more than anyone else. Good comic overall. Can't really, I was saying, I think Octopus do something similar. I don't know if it's Octopus, but, it could be. But there are races that do stuff like that, and it will, like, they will break their arms to get away from predators. Yes, Octopus will do that, and then they grow back and stuff. Lizards are like that, too. Their tail can come clean off, and it's like a survival mechanism, because better your tail's gone, and you live another day with, like, it to grow back, than to be chopped away. It's a cool biological mechanism, but you can really hurt a lizard if you're not careful. Not that most of us encounter lizards day to day, but Just a fun lizard fact. Don't spook him. Don't try and grab him by the tail. They can really hurt him. And who wants to do that? Anyhow, so I think that's about it for Justice League number 49. But we got a bunch of comics, and so yesterday I went to the comic store, I would read a book, go on stream, and review it, and I just kind of kept doing that as much as I had time to do so yesterday. Today, between then and now, I've read all the books, so we're going to just kind of do these streams one after the other, so we'll take like a 5-minute break or so, but if you guys are still down to hang out, or you can kind of come and go as you please, it should be going for the better part of this afternoon as we talk about different comics that I pulled this week. I quite enjoy splitting them up a little bit. It's less tiring for me, and then we get to do more as we go along. But next up is going to be Amazing Spider-Man number 44, so stay tuned for that in like 5 minutes or so, and then we'll just keep going with that. I'll let you know what's next after this one. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see those of you who are going to stick around very soon.